Every long-term stretch animation, you cut your hair, you make an animation, you make a video.
Hotel Mario. I want to do a serious review of Hotel Mario. Okay.
Whoa, looks like we got a big donation.
Ooh, something incoming.
Looks like we surpassed 3K.
Ladies and gentlemen,
We got
I
it.
have a project. Well, yes, we got him, but also I have a project to do.
It was a spur-of-the-moment idea. Sometimes we find ourselves creating works we never imagined doing at all, and that's okay. When it came to the Dawn of a New Day Summer 2023 event, it was a great opportunity for motivating viewers to donate to the cause. I have no objection about being sentenced to review Hotel Mario by method of a donation to charity, but that explains why we're here today. Before we continue into the main section of the review, I wanted to give a quick disclaimer about the footage. Emulation of the Philips CDI has continued to be error-prone, despite great advancements from the fan community. While I was able to fully play and experience the game on my device, there were massive graphical errors that I deemed too distracting for the review. A huge thank you to NintendoComplete for this footage of the game. Crisp pixels and no graphical glitches in sight. Check the description and give them some support. Thank you. I still remember the days when people were actively making ridiculous parody videos about the infamous games featuring Nintendo properties on the Philips CDI. Some of these videos were my earliest exposures to YouTube content relevant to video games. As surprising as that may sound, the chicanery on display is not to any level of convincing parody well before the days of AI, but it contributes to the sheer goofiness of this obsession from days past. It may go without saying for many, but the voice acting, animations, and overall production value of the Zelda CDI trilogy and Hotel Mario were infamous in the mid to late 2000s, with an active scene of riffs and spoofs poking at the material. These games feature some of the most quoted dialogue for anyone who's been a part of online discourse for games, and that cannot be understated. The humor found in quoting cutscenes from these CDI titles is very much old news for many, while others still find them hysterical. But regardless, it cannot be denied that the potent discovery of these feigned takes on classic Nintendo IPs motivated people to look at what these games were actually like to play. Without persistent meme culture, this wouldn't have happened to the same degree. This is where I come into the story for today's video. To those who might not be aware, Nintendo licensed a couple of their video game IPs to Philips in exchange for assistance with an SNES add-on after a deal with Sony fell through. A rare sight today, but this is the business deal that produced these non-Nintendo titles on the CDI home media platform, a device that was largely unsuccessful and unappreciated. Hotel Mario was developed by Fantasy Factory, a team of, at the time, older game developers who were reportedly entering retirement. While there's nothing fallible about that, I bring this to light because it will soon create context for why the game resulted in its final state. One of the appealing aspects of Hotel Mario is its simple concept. Players are tasked with closing every door on each screen in order to clear the level, and utilizing Mario's abilities to take care of any threats that get in the way of such a mundane task. Essentially, Hotel Mario is a light puzzle game, with movement and jumping motions that merge the new with the old. The brevity of that gameplay loop on offer definitely gives the game an arcade-like feel, with fast pacing, one-screen levels to complete and repeat. This is totally fine by me, and it helps to tie Hotel Mario to the arcade-like roots of the original Donkey Kong and Mario Bros. I think there's definitely something to be said about simple and approachable gameplay for a game to last, but Hotel Mario was never given the chance to make this impression thanks to its commercial failure. The controls are responsive and straightforward, appropriately giving you that precise control you want in this kind of game. I will say that jumping feels a little too floaty for my tastes, but that's hardly worth complaining about. At this point, I could probably end the review here, but the arcade-like gameplay lives and dies based on the level design and obstacles. And while there's lacking aspects to the former that I'll get to later, the enemies help make the journey more interesting. Take Lemmy's High 8 Regency, for example. Of course, you'd expect enemies to occupy the floors, making up the level geometry, but the developers raised the stakes by having Lemmy fly around freely. This makes for a nice challenge, adding to the purpose of designing levels around flat hotel floors, and exploiting that limitation to force players to put in some effort when avoiding enemies. Honestly, the enemy design is really one of the highlights for the game. One of the best showcases is Stage 8 of Roy's Hard Brick Hotel, featuring parachuted bombs that land on the various floors in order to cause havoc. It's up to you to micromanage and track where the bombs are gonna fall, and it's genuinely satisfying to engage with this. Before my playthrough, I wondered how the developers handled the possibility of riding an elevator, only to have the doors open right as an enemy walked by. It would feel rather cheap to take damage from such an occurrence, especially since there's no telling where the elevators lead to in some of the more complex layouts. Thankfully, the devs thought of this, and Mario is invincible while arriving on a new floor. Only once the player has touched the D-pad will the hitbox become active again. Thank goodness for this. You know what else I really appreciate about this game? The inspired visual design. Beginning with the various hotels, each facility is operated and artistically tailored by one of Bowser's Koopalings. Though the cutscenes fail to portray this with the environments in between the hotels, these monumental buildings are part of the Club Koopa Resort. It's a silly idea, having all these hotels operated by Bowser's henchpeople, but it's a fun one. Even though the player's objective never changes, you can count on the visual design of each hotel to offer massive contrast in color, style, and theme. Take Morton's Hotel, which is built in a massive tree, essentially a treehouse of prestige. I just love that. The artists went to great lengths to flesh out these screens as much as possible. Once more, I remind you that each level is a single screen that never scrolls vertically or horizontally. So it is worth appreciating that the style of each hotel is conveyed this well. Take a gander at the visual design of Larry's Chilton Hotel, which features glass elevators that connect an underground structure. Again, it's silly to have a hotel in a cave, but why would I complain when it's so off-brand and unique for the Mario series? All of this goodwill achieved by the artists and visual design of Hotel Mario leads to strong theming and a unique sense of identity. The gameplay stands out in my mind entirely because of what I was looking at, and this is the same game with cutscenes that have generated endless memes and parodies, so I'd say this is really worth complimenting. If first impressions were all there was to share, I could end this video on a somewhat optimistic tone. Truly, despite the impending discussions about Hotel Mario's cutscenes and soundtrack, I'd have very little to critique otherwise. However, Hotel Mario's arcade-like gameplay isn't matched by its own content and structure. This is not a very long game, but it certainly feels like quite the journey. My enjoyment and appreciation begins to fall when entering the 5th hotel, Ludwig's Thump Castle. Dry bones and booze act as decent obstacles for the player, but the feeling arises where the one-screen limitation starts to become a detriment. Frankly, the level gimmicks in Hotel Mario aren't very interesting. By the time the player reaches Ludwig's or Wendy's hotels, they've encountered similar enemies and layouts several times over. It appears that the devs might have committed to a certain amount of worlds and levels before designing a satisfactory amount of level gimmicks to compensate. At this point, it is undeniable that the gameplay loop is too basic for the given runtime, with Mario's moveset remaining stagnant. One could argue the latter point as a quality of the game, but the issue lies with a convention of 2D Mario known for adding variety being left on the cutting room floor. Power-ups. Besides the standard Fire Flower, Star, and Mushroom, there are no additional tools to be found. This is an unfortunate situation. It's not difficult to imagine how Mario's 3 Hammer Bros suit or Mario World's cape could add tremendously to the combat, just to name a couple of examples. Simplistic mechanics are complemented by replayability, and this is something Hotel Mario lacks. My tolerance for the length of the adventure waned as the mechanics failed to scale. The hotels flatlined to such a degree that I genuinely became annoyed. I knew my experience had taken a turn when I began to focus more intently on the soundtrack as I played. You've been listening to many selections from the soundtrack throughout this review, and I can only describe the instrumentation and compositions as bland and unpleasing. The scoring for the first cutscene, along with the main menu theme, are quite infamous, and for good reason. The instrumentation exists in this strange realm between retro PC game music and real-world synthesizer, and I recognize that's hardly even a helpful comparison. I just mean to say that I find it unnatural and unappealing. The bass is heavy, the contrast in high, medium, and low instrument parts are vague, and there's no clear identity to the sound. But I'm not finished here. This has been documented by many, but for the sake of accurately critiquing the game, we need to spend a moment discussing the crime of copying protected music, aka stealing. This is the 1933 film adaptation of Little Women.
May I engage you for this dance, Miss March?
No, thank you, I'm not dancing.
Kitty Ford.
This piece of music was blatantly transcribed into Hotel Mario's strange instrumentation. I've done all the digging I can into this, and I can say with modest certainty that the music was lifted in this manner without permission from the rights holders. Music copyright law is a complex matter, and I am no expert in that. So the legality of Hotel Mario's incessant use of this melody, harmony, and structure of this piece from Little Women may be debatable. But I still find it incredibly embarrassing and disrespectful on behalf of the development team for the inclusion. I take particular issue with it because there's no acknowledgement of how this theme was selected to be arranged for the game. And even then, it's hardly altered enough to be considered an inspiration. This isn't a problem in the same league as Hotel Mario having bland level design. We're talking about stealing music. That's a real problem. Oh, but the situation becomes comical, because the credits theme is the same arrangement of the Little Women theme, just in a different key. This comes off as hasty and rushed. Despite all of this, I have to say, the Little Women theme is the only piece in the soundtrack that I actually enjoy, despite all the issues. Memes aside, this is genuinely the best piece in the soundtrack, and its presence here is dubious.
Nice of the princess to invite us over for a picnic, eh, Luigi?
I'm taking us back to the beginning for a specific reason. This cutscene is still the most silly and ironic content of all, but after experiencing what Hotel Mario has to offer, with its diminishing quality and non-existent growth of mechanics, it really gave me a new perspective on the scene, and every other scene. The truth is, goofy and embarrassing cutscenes are not suitable rewards for play. Let's not misunderstand the intent. Hotel Mario's animated cutscenes are designed and placed throughout the adventure to reward players for progressing from hotel to hotel. So the execution of these cutscenes really does sour my feelings toward the game when in the heat of the moment. I feel the critical response to Hotel Mario in 1994 was accurate in portraying this feeling. Critics panned the animations and voice acting especially. These are poor performances that do little to capture any sense of whimsy or personality that the Mario cast has such potential for. What truly bothers me, however, is the off-brand and off-sprite posing in these scenes. Mario, Luigi, Peach, Bowser, and the Koopalings look unintentionally goofy because of their strange proportions and lack of consistent anatomy. I praised Hotel Mario's theming and locations, but there are some very odd choices that really make one squint. The hotels have unique names to go along with their motifs, and that is appreciated. But this goes off the rails with the final building. Bowser's Seizures Palace.
Huh?
I understand that's a pun on Caesar's Palace, but come on! It's not worth making a big situation out of, but it is tasteless, if accidentally. The final level doubles down on the discomfort with the title of Bowser's Barbecue Room. You can't make this stuff up. The final world exemplifies everything that I find irritating about this game. The devs have stretched the simple concept of closing doors and avoiding enemies to its absolute limit, with mind-numbing repetition. Koopas, Boos, and Paragoomas, all of these enemies are mixed together in displeasing ways. What was once a competent sense of enemy placement in the earlier hotels is entirely missing in the finale. They're just floating about and littering the screen with their presence. Worst of all, Bowser's Hotel features levels with more than one screen of content. This addresses one of my major complaints with the level design and gameplay from earlier, but this is too little too late. At this point, I want nothing more than to just put the game down. It can be hard to articulate, but sometimes the experience of playing a game in the moment speaks more to the core problems than discussing fundamental design ever could. I felt constant malaise during my trek through the final hotel as I stood in front of elevator doors, awaiting the opportunity to move while listening to that monotonous instrumentation of the soundtrack as it just drones on. Unless you really put your mind to it for some greater reason, I do not see Hotel Mario providing players with an incentive to keep playing. With atrocious cutscenes and diminishing returns on gameplay, one is left wondering about value. What is Hotel Mario's value? Hotel Mario has been retroactively given a much maligned reception, occasionally being cited as one of the worst games of all time. This is all subjective, but despite my many grievances with the title, I'd hardly consider it worthy of such scorn. When actually looking at the game and what it entails, it's a hollow experience that ranges from inoffensive to mundane. I designed this review to reflect the downward trajectory of my experience as authentically as I could, and even though I ended things negatively, the overall package leaves me feeling more indifferent and conflicted than bothered. Reviewing Hotel Mario on its merits alone was always going to be anticlimactic, which is why I discussed the game's impact on internet culture and its more eccentric qualities. Still, I can say definitively that it is not worth your time to seek out and play. The true appeal of this title should be pretty obvious then, but I think the staying power of Hotel Mario is a testament to the principles of finding value in something in a meta sense, unintended by its original purpose. There's a notion that art can be appreciated more as a concept than an execution, in the same kind of vein of parody. I believe this is absolutely applicable to Hotel Mario. The highlights of the experience aren't the levels or mechanics, it's the goofy cutscene presentation and the title on the tin. Diving deeper into the experience revealed a range of competency to the actual video game behind the legend, yet the results still didn't shake the presumption I had, and I'm okay with this. That title, Hotel Mario, is ridiculously specific and off-kilter for the series it represents. It's the video game equivalent of a non sequitur. Yet even if Hotel Mario was conceived as a parody in an alternate universe, the result would have likely been the same. A game that can be appreciated for its outlandish theming on a familiar brand, but one that is progressively less interesting the more you engage with its repetitious gameplay. But perhaps I could be wrong. After all, the ideas behind the gameplay are decent on paper. Maybe Hotel Mario could have had a really fun and addictive gameplay loop if in better hands. When looking at the game in its totality, it's a fascinating dud of a title, the ultimate oxymoron. If it weren't for the charity donations that practically mandated this review, I may have never learned about things like Bowser's Seizure's Palace, or Peach managing to fly out of an exploding cave to a city in the sky within a 5-second period. Hotel Mario is best left to the old days of the internet. Not in the sense that it should be forgotten, but it doesn't need to be played. The internet's been discussing and preserving this game in an endearing way for decades now, and that's a commendation I may never grant again. Well done, all of you.
Well, here's to us.